Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of the Hogfather. Let's begin. Susan had never hung up a stocking. She never looked for eggs laid by the soul-cake duck. She never put a tooth under her pillow in the serious expectation that a dentally inclined fairy would turn up. It wasn't that her parents didn't believe in such things, they just didn't need to believe in them. They knew they existed, they just wished they didn't. Oh, there had been presents at the right time with a careful label saying who they were from, and a superb egg on soul cake morning filled with sweets. Juvenile Teeth earned no less than $1 from her father without argument. In fact, when she was 8, she'd found a collection of animal skulls in an attic, relic of some former duke of an inquiring turn of mind. Her father had been a bit preoccupied with affairs of state, and she'd made $27 before being found out. The eponymous molar, with hindsight, had been a mistake. Skulls never frightened her, even then. But it was all straightforward. She knew now that they'd been trying to protect her. She hadn't known then that her father had been Death's apprentice for a while, and that her mother was Death's adopted daughter. She'd had very dim recollections of being taken a few times to see someone who'd been quite, well, jolly in a strange, thin way. And the visits had suddenly stopped. And she'd met him later, and yes, he had his good side, and for a while she wondered why her parents had been so unfeeling, and she knew now why they tried to keep her away. There was far more to genetics than squirmy spirals. She could walk through walls when she really had to. She could use a tone of voice that was more like accents than words, that somehow reached inside people and operated all the right switches, and her hair... That had only happened recently, though. It used to be unmanageable, but at around the age of 17, she had found it more or less managed itself. Lucky bitch. That had lost her several young men. Someone's hair rearranging itself into a new style, the tresses curling around themselves like a nest of kittens, could definitely put the crimp on any relationship. She'd been making good progress, though. She could go for days now without feeling anything other than entirely human. But it was always the case, wasn't it? You could go out into the world, succeed on your own terms, and sooner or later some embarrassing old relative was bound to turn up. Grunting and swearing, the gnome clambered out of another drain pipe, jammed its hat firmly on its head, threw its sack onto a snowdrift, and jumped down after it. "It's a good one," he said. "Ha! Take 'em weeks to get rid of that one." He took a crumpled piece of paper out of a pocket and examined it closely. Then he looked at an elderly figure working away quietly at the next house. It was standing by a window, drawing with great concentration on the glass. The gnome wandered up interested and watched critically. "Why, just fern patterns," he said after a while. "Pretty, yeah, but you wouldn't catch me putting a penny in your hat for fern patterns." The figure turned, brush in hand. "I happen to like fern patterns," said Jack Frost coldly. "It's just that people expect, sad, big-eyed kids, kittens looking out of boots, little doggies, that sort of things. I do ferns. Or big pots of sunflowers, happy seaside scenes, and ferns. I mean, supposing some big high priest wanted you to paint the temple ceiling with gods and angels and such like, what did you do then?" He could have as many gods and angels as he liked, provided they looked like ferns. "I resent the implication that I am solely fern-fixated," said Jack Frost. "I can also do a very nice paisley pattern." "What's that look like, then?" "Well, it does, admittedly, have a certain ferny quality to the Uninitiated I. Frost leaned forward. Who are you? The gnome took a step backwards. You're not a tooth fairy, are you? I see more and more of them about these days. Nice girls. Nah, not teeth, said the gnome, clutching his sack. What then? The gnome told him. Really, said Jack Frost. I thought they just turned up. Well, come to that, I thought frost on the window just happened all by itself, said the gnome. Guess it is all relative. Here, you don't look half spiky. I bet you go through a lot of bed seats. I don't sleep, said Frost icily, turning away. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a large number of windows to do. Ferns aren't easy. You need a steady hand. What do you mean dead? Susan demanded. How can the Hogfather be dead? Isn't he what you are? An anthropomorphic personification. Yes, he has become so. The spirit of Hogswatch. But how? How can anyone kill the Hogfather? Poison sherry? Spikes in the chimney? There are more subtle ways. Oh dear, the soot, said Albert loudly. Chokes me up something cruel. And you've taken over, said Susan, ignoring him. That's sick. Death contrived to look hurt. I'll just go and have a look somewhere, said Albert, pressing past her and opening the door. She pushed it shut quickly. And what are you doing here, Albert? She said, clutching at the straw. I thought you'd die if you ever came back to the world. Ah, but we are not in the world, said Death. We are in the special, congruent reality created for the Hogfather. Normal rules have to be suspended. How else could anyone get around the entire world in one night? That's right, said Albert, leering. One of the Hogfather's little helpers, me. Official. Got the pointed little green hat and Aerofan. God, what voice am I giving Albert? Jesus. He spotted the glass of sherry and a couple of turnips that the children had left on the table and bore down on them. Susan looked shocked. A couple of days earlier, she'd taken the children to the Hogfather's Grotto in one of the big shops in the mall. Of course, it wasn't the real one, but it turned out to be a fairly good actor in a red suit. There had been people dressed up as pixies and a picket outside the shop by the Campaign for Equal Heights. The CEH was always ready to fight for the rights of the differently tall, and it was not put off by the fact that most pixies and gnomes weren't the least interested in dressing up in little pointy hats with bells on when there are other far more interesting things to do. All that tinkly-wee stuff was for the old folks back home in the forest. When a tiny man hit Ankh-Morpork, he preferred to get drunk, kick some serious ankle, and search for tiny women. In fact, the CEH now had to spend so much time explaining to people that they hadn't got enough rights, that they barely had any time left to fight for them. None of the pixies had looked anything like Albert. If they had, people would have only gone into the grotto armed. Been good, have you? Said Albert and spat into the fireplace. Susan stared at him. Death leaned down. She stared up into the blue glow of his eyes. You are keeping well, he said. Yes. Self-reliant, making your own way in the world. Yes. Good. Well, come, Albert. We'll load the stockings and get on with things. A couple of letters appeared in Death's hands. Someone christened the child Twyla. I'm afraid so, but why? And the other one, Gawain? Yes, but look how... Why Gawain? I suppose it's a good, strong name for a fighter? A self-fulfilling prophecy, I suspect. I see the girl writes in green crayon on pink paper with a mouse in the corner. The mouse is wearing a dress. I ought to point out that she decided to do that so the Hogfather would think she was sweet, including the bad spelling, said Susan. But why are you... She says she is 5 years old. In years, yes. In cynicism, she's about 35. Why are you doing the... But she believes in the Hogfather. So you've been leaving anything if there was a dolly in it for her. But you're not going to leave without telling me. Death hung the stockings back on the mantelpiece. Now we must be going. Happy Hogswatch, oh. Yes. Ho, ho, ho. Nice, Sherry, said Albert, wiping his mouth. Rage overtook Susan's curiosity. It had to travel quite fast. You've actually been drinking the actual drinks little children leave out for the Hogfather? Yeah, why not? He ain't drinking them. Not where he's gone. And how many have you had, may I ask? Don't know. Ain't counted, said Albert happily. I'm relating to this guy more than I care to admit. 1,800,706, said Death. And 69,8,319 pork pies. And 1 turnip. It looked pork pie shaped, said Albert. Everything does after a while. Then why haven't you exploded? Don't know. Always had a good digestion. To the Hogfather, all pork pies are as one pork pie. Except the one like a turnip. Come, Albert, we have trespassed on Susan's time. Why are you doing this? Susan screamed. I am sorry, I cannot tell you. Forget you saw me. It's not your business. Not my business? How can... And now we must be going. Nighty-night, said Albert. The clock struck thrice for the half hour. It was still 6:30. And they were gone. The sledge hurtled across the sky. Bear with me. Sorry for a second. I just need to do something. I gotta work later in the day, so just need to pull up a clock so I can keep an eye on the time. The sledge hurtled across the sky. So try to find out what this is about, you know, said Albert. Oh dear. Especially after you told her not to. You think so? Yeah, said Albert. Dear me, I still have a lot to learn about humans, don't I? Oh, I don't know, said Albert. Obviously, it'd be quite wrong to involve a human in all this. That is why, you will recall, I clearly forbade her to take an interest. Yeah, you did. Besides, it's against the rules. You said the little gray buggers had already broken the rules. Yes, but I can't just wave a magic wand and make it all better. There must be procedures. Death stared ahead for a moment and then shrugged. And we have so much to do. We have promises to keep. Well, the night is young, said Albert, sitting back in the sacks. The night is old. The night is always old. The pigs galloped on then. No, it ain't. I'm sorry. The night isn't any older than the day, master. It stands to reason. There must have been a day before anyone knew what the night was. Yes, but it's more dramatic. Oh, right then. Susan stood by the fireplace. It wasn't as though she disliked Death. Death, considered as an individual rather than life's final curtain, was someone she couldn't help liking in a strange kind of way. Even so, the idea of the Grim Reaper filling the Hogswatch stockings of the world didn't fit well in her head, no matter which way she twisted it. It was like imagining Old Man Trouble as the Tooth Fairy. Oh yes, Old Man Trouble, now there was a nasty one for you. But honestly, what kind of sick person went creeping round into little children's bedrooms all night? Well, the Hogfather, of course, but there was a little tinkling sound from somewhere near the base of the Hogswatch tree. The raven backed away from the charge of one of the glittering balls. Sorry, it mumbled. Bit of a species reaction there. You know, round, glittering. Sometimes you just gotta peck. That chocolate money belongs to the children. Squeak, said the Death of Rats, backing away from the shiny coins. Why is he doing this? Squeak. You don't know either? Squeak. Is there some kind of trouble? Did he do something to the real Hogfather? Squeak! Why won't he tell me? Squeak. Thank you. You've been very helpful. Something ripped behind her. She turned and saw the Raven carefully removing a strip of red wrapping paper from a packet. Stop that this minute. It looked up guiltily. It's only a little bit, it said. No one's going to miss it. What do you want it for, right? What do you want it for anyway? We're attracted to bright colors, right? Automatic reaction. That's jackdaws. Damn, is it? The Death of Rats nodded. Squeak. Oh, so suddenly you're Mr. Ornithologist, are you? Snapped the Raven. Susan sat down and held out her hand. The Death of Rats leapt onto it. She could feel its claws like tiny pins. It was just like those scenes where the sweet and pretty heroine sings a little duet with Mr. Bluebird. Similar, anyway, in general outline at least, but with more of a PG rating. Has he gone funny in the head? Squeak. The rat shrugged. But it could happen, couldn't it? He's very old, and I suppose he sees a lot of terrible things. Squeak. All the trouble in the world, the Raven translated. I understand, said Susan. That was a talent, too. She didn't understand what the rat said. She just understood what it meant. There's something wrong, and he won't tell me, said Susan. That made her even more angry. But Albert is in on it, too, she added. She thought, thousands, millions of years in the same job. Not a nice one. It isn't always cheerful old men passing away at a great age. Sooner or later, it was bound to get anyone down. Someone had to do something. It was like that time when Twyla's grandmother had started telling everyone that she was the Empress of Crawl and had stopped wearing clothes. And Susan was bright enough to know that the phrase, someone ought to do something, was not by itself a helpful one. People who used it never added the rider, and that someone is me. I'm feeling very attacked right now. But someone ought to do something, and right now, the whole pool of someones consisted of her, and no one else. Twyla's grandmother had ended up in a nursing home overlooking the sea at Quirm. That sort of option probably didn't apply here. Besides, he'd be unpopular with the other residents. She concentrated. This was the simplest talent of them all. She was amazed that other people couldn't do it. She shut her eyes, placed her hands palm down in front of her at shoulder height, spread her fingers, and lowered her hands. When they were halfway down, she heard the clock stop ticking. The last tick was long, drawn out, like a death rattle. Time stopped. But duration continued. She'd always wondered when she was small why visits to her grandfather could go on for days, and yet when they got back, the calendar was still plodding along as if they'd never been away. Now she knew why, though probably no human being would ever really understand the how. Sometimes, somewhere, somehow, the numbers on the clock did not count. Between every rational moment were a billion irrational ones. Somewhere behind the hours, there's a place where the Hogfather rode, the two fairies climbed their ladders, Jack Frost drew his pictures, the soul-cake duck laid her chocolate eggs. And the endless spaces between the clumsy seconds, Steph moved like a witch, dancing through raindrops, never getting wet. Humans could live, no, humans couldn't live here, no, because even when you diluted a glass of wine with a bath full of water, you might have more liquid, but you still have the same amount of wine. A rubber band was still the same rubber band, no matter how far it was stretched. Humans could exist here, though. It was never too cold, although the air did prickle like winter air on a sunny day. But out of human habit, Susan got her cloak out of the closet. Squeak! Haven't you got some mice and rats to see to then? Nah, it's pretty quiet just before Hog's Watch, said the raven, who was trying to fold the red paper between his claws. You get a lot of gerbils and hamsters, and that in a few days, mind. When the kids forget to feed them or try to find out what makes them go. I'm sorry. That just... Sudden black humor always gets me. I'm sorry. Of course he'd be leaving the children, but it wasn't as if anything could happen to them. There wasn't any time for it to happen in. She hurried down the stairs and let herself out of the front door. Snow hung in the air. It was not a poetic description. It hovered like the stars. When flakes touched Susan, they melted with little electric flashes. There was a lot of traffic in the street, but it was fossilized in time. She walked carefully between it until she reached the entrance to the park. The snow had done what even wizards and the watch couldn't do, which was clean up Ankh-Morpork. It hadn't had time to get dirty. In the morning, it would probably look as though the city had been covered in coffee meringue. But for now, it surrounded the bushes and trees in pure white. There was no noise. The curtains of snow shut out the city lights. A few yards into the park, and she might as well be in the country. She stuck her fingers into her mouth and whistled. You know, that could have been done with a bit more ceremony, said the raven, who'd perched on a snow-encrusted twig. Shut up. It's good, though. Better than most women could do. Shut up. Prick. They waited. Why have you stolen that piece of red paper from a little girl's present, said Susan. I've got plans, said the raven darkly. They waited again. She wondered what would happen if it didn't work. She wondered if the rat would snigger. It had the most annoying snigger in the world. What would a rat sniggering sound like? Then there were hoofbeats, and the floating snow burst open, and the horse was there. Binky trotted round in a circle, and then stood and steamed. He wasn't saddled. Death's horse didn't let you fall. If I get on, Susan thought, it'll all start again. I'll be out of the light and into the world beyond this one. I'll fall off the tightrope. But a voice inside her said, you want to, though, don't you? 10 seconds later, there was only the snow. The raven turned to the deaf rat. Any idea where I can get some string? Squeak. She was watched. One said, who is she? One said, do we remember that Death adopted a daughter? The young woman is her daughter. One said, she is human. One said, mostly. One said, can she be killed? One said, oh, yes. One said, well, that's all right then. One said, we don't think we're gonna get into trouble over this, do we? All this is not exactly authorized. We don't want questions asked. One said, we have a duty to rid the universe of sloppy thinking. One said, everyone will be so grateful when they find out. Oh, that voice is gonna wear on me. Binky touched down lightly on Death's lawn. Susan didn't bother with the front door, but went round the back, which was never locked. There had been changes, one significant change at least. There was a cat flap in the door. She stared at it. After a second or two, a ginger cat came through the flap, gave her an "I'm not hungry and you're not interesting" look, and padded off into the gardens. Susan pushed open the door into the kitchen. Cats of every size and color covered every surface. Hundreds of eyes swiveled to watch her. It was Mrs. Gamage all over again, she thought. The old woman was a regular in Byers for the company and was quite gaga. And one of the symptoms of those going completely yo-yo was that they broke out in chronic cats. Usually cats who'd mastered every detail of feline existence except the whereabouts of the dirt box. Several of them had their noses in a bowl of cream. Susan had never been able to see the attraction in cats. They were owned by the kind of people who liked puddings. There were actual people in the world whose idea of heaven would be a chocolate cat. "Puss off, the lot of you," she said. "I've never known him have pets." The cats gave her a look to indicate that they were intending to go somewhere else in any case, and strolled off, licking their chops. The bowl slowly filled up again. They were obviously living cats, only life had color here. Everything else was created by death. Color, along with plumbing and music, were arts that escaped the grasp of his genius. She left them in the kitchen and wandered along to the study. There were changes here too, by the look of it. He'd been trying to learn to play the violin again. He'd never been able to understand why he couldn't play music. The desk was a mess. Books lay open, piled on one another. They were the ones Susan had never learned to read. Some of the characters hovered above the pages or moved in complicated little patterns as they read you while you read them. Intricate devices had been scattered across the top. They looked vaguely navigational, but on what ocean and under which stars? Several pages of parchment had been filled up with Death's own handwriting. It was immediately recognizable. No one else Susan had ever met had handwriting with serifs. It looked as though he'd been trying to work something out. Not Klatz, not How Wonderland, not the Empire. Let us say 20 million children at 2 pounds of toys per child. It equals 17,857 tons, 1,785 tons per hour. Memo, don't forget the sooty footprints. More practice on the ho, ho, ho. Cushion. She put the paper back carefully. Sooner or later it'd get to you. Death was fascinated by humans, and study was never a one-way thing. A man might spend his entire life peering at the private life of elementary particles, and then find he either knew who he was or where he was, but not both. Death had picked up humanity. Not the real thing, but something that might pass for it until you examined it closely. The house even imitated human houses. Death had created a bedroom for himself, despite the fact that he never slept. If he really picked things up from humans, had he tried insanity? It was very popular, after all. Perhaps, after all these millennia, he wanted to be nice. She let herself into the room of lifetimers. She liked the sound of it when she was a little girl, but now the hiss of sand from millions of hourglasses, and the little pings and pops as full ones vanished and now empty ones appeared, was not so enjoyable. Now she knew what was going on. Of course, everyone died sooner or later. It just wasn't right to be listening to it happening. She was about to leave when she noticed the open door in a place where she had never seen a door before. It was the skies, a whole section of shelving, complete with its whispering glasses, had swung out. Susan pushed it back and forth with a finger. When it was shut, you'd have to look hard to see the crack. There was a much smaller room on the other side. It was merely the size of, say, a cathedral, and it was lined floor to ceiling with more hourglasses than Susan could just see dimly in the light from the big room. She stepped inside and snapped her fingers. "Light," she commanded. A couple of candles sprang into life. The hourglasses were wrong. The ones in the main room, however metaphorical they might be, were solid-looking things of wood and brass and glass. But these looked as though they were made of headlights and shadows with no real substance at all. She peered at a large one. The name in it was Offler. The crocodile god, she thought? Well, gods had a life, presumably, but they never actually died as far as she knew. They just dwindled away to a voice on the wind and a footnote in some textbook on religion. There were other gods lined up. She recognized a few of them. But there were smaller lifetimers on the shelf. When she saw the labels, she nearly burst out laughing. The Tooth Fairy, the Sandman, John Barleycorn, the Soul Cake Duck, the god of what? She stepped back and something crunched under her feet. There were shards of glass on the floor. She reached down and picked up the biggest. Only a few letters remained of the name etched into the glass. Hogfa. Oh no, it's true, Granddad. What have you done? When she left, the candles winked out. Darkness sprang back. And in the darkness, among the spilled sand, a faint sizzle and a tiny spark of light. Mustrum Ridcully adjusted the towel around his waist. "How are we doing, Mr. Moto?" The university gardener saluted. "The tanks are full, Mr. Arch-Chancellor, sir, and I've been stoking the hot water boilers all day." The other senior wizards clustered in the doorway. "Really, Mustrum, I think this is most unwise," said the lecturer in recent runes. "It was surely sealed up for a purpose." "Remember what it said on the door," said the dean. "Oh, they just wrote that on it to keep people out," said Ridcully, opening a fresh bar of soap. "Well, yes," said the chair of indefinite studies. "That's right. That's what people do." "It's a bathroom," said Ridcully. "You are all acting as if it's some kind of a torture chamber." "A bathroom," said the dean, "designed by bloody, stupid Johnson, Arch-Chancellor. Weatherwax only used it once and then had it sealed up. Mustrum, I beg you to reconsider. It's a Johnson." There was something of a pause because even Ridcully had to adjust his mind around this. The late, or at least severely delayed, Berghold Stutley Johnson was generally regarded as the worst inventor in the world, yet in a very specialized sense. Merely bad inventors made things that failed to operate. He wasn't among those small fry. Any fool could make something that did absolutely nothing when you pressed the button. He scorned such fumble-fingered amateurs. Everything he built worked, it just didn't do what it said on the box. If you wanted a small ground-to-air missile, you asked Johnson to design an ornamental fountain. It amounted to pretty much the same thing, but this never discouraged him, or the morbid curiosity of his clients. Music, landscape gardening, architecture, there was no start to his talents. Nevertheless, it was a little bit surprising to find that Bloody Stupid had turned to bathroom design. But as Ridcully said, it was well known that he had designed and built several large musical organs, and when you got right down to it, it was all just plumbing, wasn't it? The other chancellors who'd been there longer than the Arch-Chancellor took the view that if bloody stupid Johnson had built a fully functioning bathroom, he'd actually meant it to be something else. You know, I've always felt that Mr. Johnson was a much maligned man, said Ridcully eventually. Well, yes, of course he was, said the lecturer in recent runes, deeply exhausted. That's like saying that jam attracts wasps, you see? Not everything he made worked badly, said Ridcully stoutly, flourishing his scrubbing bus. Look at the thing they use down in the kitchens for peeling the potatoes, for example. Ah, you mean the thing with the brass plate on it saying improved manicure, the Vice Arch-Chancellor? Listen, it's just water, snapped Ridcully. Even Johnson couldn't do much harm with water. Mordo, open the sluices. Sluices? I don't know how to pronounce this. It's S-L-U-I-C-E-S. The rest of the wizards backed away as the gardener turned a couple of ornate brass wheels. I'm fed up with groping around for the soap like you fellows, said the Arch-Chancellor, as water gushed through hidden channels. Hygiene! That's the ticket. Don't say we didn't warn you, said the Dean, shutting the door. I still haven't worked out where all the pipes lead, sir, Modo ventured. We'll find out, never you fear, said Ridcully happily. He removed his hat and put on a shower cap of his own design. In deference to his profession, it was pointy. He picked up a yellow rubber duck. Man the pumps, Mr. Modo, or dwarf them, of course, in your case. Yes, Arch-Chancellor. Modo hauled on a lever. The pipe started a hammering noise, and steam leaked out a few joints. Ridcully took a last look around the bathroom. It was a hidden treasure, no doubt about it. Say what you like, old Johnson must sometimes have got it right, even if it was only by accident. The entire room, including the floor and ceiling, had been tiled in white, blue, and green. In the center, under its crown of pipes, was Johnson's patent Typhoon Superior Indoor Ablutorium, with automatic soap this, a sanitary comb in mahogany, rosewood, and copper. He'd got Modo to polish every pipe and brass tap until they gleamed. It had taken ages. Ridcully shut the frosted door behind him. The inventor of the ablutionary marvel had decided to make a mere shower a fully controllable experience. And one wall of the large cubicle held a marvelous panel covered with brass taps cast in the shapes of some mermaids and shells, and for some reason, pomegranates. There were separate feeds for salt water, hard water, and soft water, and huge wheels for accurate control of temperature. Ridcully inspected them with care. Then he stood back, looked at the tiles, and sang, "Me, me, me, me." His voice reverberated back at him. "A perfect echo," said Ridcully, one of nature's bathroom baritones. He picked up a speaking tube that had been installed to allow the bather to communicate with the engineers. "All cisterns go, Mr. Modo." "Aye, aye, sir." Ridcully opened the tap marked spray and leapt aside because part of him was still well aware that Johnson's inventiveness didn't just push the edge of the envelope, but often went across the room and out through the wall of the sorting office. A gentle shower of warm water, almost a caressing mist, enveloped him. "My word," he exclaimed, and tried another tap. Shower turned out to be a little more invigorating. Torrent made him gasp for breath, and deluge sent him groping to the panel because the top of his head felt that it was being removed. Wave sloshed a wall of warm salt water from one side of the cubicle to the other before it disappeared into the grating that was set into the middle of the floor. "Are you all right, sir?" Modo called out. "Marvelous! And there's a dozen knobs I haven't tried yet." Modo nodded and tapped a valve. Ridcully's voice in what he considered to be song, raised in what he considered to be song, boomed out through a thick cloud of steam. Oh, I knew an agricultural worker of some description, possibly a thatcher, and I knew him well, and he was a farmer now, I come to think of it, and he had a daughter, and her name I can't recall at the moment. And where was I? Ah, yes, course. Something, a humorously shaped vegetable, a turnip, I believe, something, in the sweet nightingale. Ah! Oh, oh, oh. The song shut off suddenly. All Moto could hear was a ferocious gushing noise. Arch-Chancellor? After a moment, a voice answered from the ceiling. It sounded somewhat high and hesitant. I wonder if you would be so very good as to shut the water off from out there, my dear chap. Quite gently, if you wouldn't mind. Moto carefully spun a wheel. The gushing sound gradually subsided. Ah, well done, said the voice, but now from somewhere near floor level. Well, jolly good job. I think we can definitely call it a success. Yes, indeed. I wonder if you could help me walk for a moment. I inexplicably feel a little unsteady on my feet. Moto pushed open the door and helped Ridcully out and onto a bench. He looked rather pale. Yes, indeed, said the Arch-Chancellor, his eyes a little glazed. Astoundingly successful. Just a minor point, Moto? Yes, sir? There's a tap in there we perhaps should leave alone for now, said Ridcully. I'd esteem it a service if you could go and make a little sign to hang on it. Yes, sir? Saying, do not touch it all, or something like that? Right, sir. Hang it on the one marked Old Faithful. Yes, sir. No need to mention it to the other fellows. Yes, sir. Ye gods, I've never felt so clean. Oh, I'm a child. From a vantage point among some ornamental tile work, near the ceiling, a small gnome in a bowler hat watched Ridcully carefully. When Moto had gone, the Arch-Chancellor slowly began to dry himself on a big fluffy towel. As he got his composure back, so another song wormed its way under his breath. On the second day of Hogswatch, I sent my true love back. A nasty little letter, yes indeed, and a partridge in a pear tree. The gnome slid down onto the tiles and crept up behind the briskly shaking sape. Ridcully, after a few more trial runs, settled on a song which evolves somewhere on every planet where there are winters. It's often dragooned into the service of some local religion, and a few words are changed. But it's really about things that have to do with gods, only in the same way that roots have to do with leaves. The rising of the sun and the running of the deer. Ridcully spun. A corner of wet towel caught the gnome on the ear and flicked it onto its back. I saw you creeping up, roared the Arch-Chancellor. What's the game, then? Small-time thief, are you? The gnome slid backwards on the soapy surface. What's your game, mister? You ain't supposed to be able to see me. I'm a wizard. We can see things that are really there, you know, said Ridcully. And in the case of the bursar, things that aren't there, too. What's that in the bag? You don't want to open the bag, mister. You really don't want to open the bag. Why? What have you got in it? The gnome sagged. It ain't what's in it, mister. It's what'll come out. I has to let them out one at a time. No knowing what'll happen if they all gets out at once. Ridcully looked interested and starts on the string. You'll really wish you hadn't, mister, the gnome pleaded. Will I? What are you doing here, young man? The gnome gave up. Well, you know the Tooth Fairy. Yes, of course, said Ridcully. Well, I ain't her, but it's sort of like the same business, you see? What, you take things away? Not take away as such, more sort of bring... like new teeth? Like new verrucas, said the gnome. Death threw the sack back into the back of the sledge and climbed in after it. "You're doing well, master," said Albert. "The cushion is still uncomfortable," said Death, hitching his belt. "I am not used to a big, fat stomach." "Just a stomach is the best I could do, master. You're starting off with a handicap sort of thing." Albert unscrewed the top of a bottle of cold tea. All the sherry had made him thirsty. "Doing well, master," he repeated, taking a pull. "All the soot in the fireplaces, the footprints, them swigged sherries, the sleigh tracks all over the roof. It's got to work." "You think so?" "Sure. And I made sure some of them saw me. I know if they are peeping," Death added proudly. "Well done, sir." "Yes. Though here's a tip, though. Just ho, ho, ho will do. Don't say, 'Cower, brief mortals,' unless you want them to grow up to be moneylenders or some such. Ho, ho, ho." "Yes, you're really getting the hang of it." Albert looked down hurriedly at his notebook so that Death wouldn't see his face. Now I gotta tell you, master, what'll really do some good is a public appearance, really. "Oh, I don't normally do them." "The Hogfather's more of a public figure, master. And one good public appearance will do more good than any amount of letting kids see you by accident. Good for the old belief muscles." "Really? Ho, ho, ho." Right. That's really good, master." Where was I? Yes. "The shops will be open late. Lots of kiddies get taken to see the Hogfather, you see. Not the real one, of course. Just some old geezer with a pillow up his jumper. Saving your presence, master." "Not real? Ho, ho, ho." "Oh, no, and you don't need. The children know this? Ho, ho, ho." Albert scratched his nose. "Suppose so, master?" "This should not be. No wonder there has been this difficulty. Belief was compromised. Ho, ho, ho." "Could be, master, the ho, ho, ho. Where does this travesty take place?" Ho, ho, ho. Albert gave up. "Well, Crumley's in the mall, for one, very popular. The Hogfather Grotto. They always have a good Hogfather, apparently. Let's get there and slay them. Ho, ho, ho." "Right you are, master." "That was a pun, or a play on words, Albert. I don't know if you noticed." "I'm laughing like hell deep down, sir." Ho, ho, ho. Arch-Chancellor Ridcully grinned. He often grinned. He was one of those men who grinned even when they were annoyed. But right now he grinned because he was proud. A little sore still, perhaps, but still proud. "Amazing bathroom, ain't it?" he said. "They had it walled up, you know. Damn silly thing to do. I mean, perhaps there were a few teething troubles," he sifted gingerly. "But that's only to be expected. It's got everything. Do you see? Foot baths in the shape of clam cells. Look. A whole wardrobe for dressing gowns. And that tub over there's got a big blower thingy, so he's got bubbly water without even having to eat starchy food. And this thingy here with the mermaid holding it up's a special pot for your toenail clippings. It's got everything, this place." "A special pot for nail clippings," said the Veruca gnome. "Oh, can't be too careful," said Ridcully, lifting the lid of an ornate jar marked bath salts and pulling out a bottle of wine. "Get hold of something like someone's nail clippings, and you've got them under your control. That's real magic. Dawn of time stuff." He held the wine bottle up to the light. "Should be cooled nicely by now," he said, extracting the cork. "Verucas, eh?" "Wish I knew why," said the gnome. "You mean you don't know?" "Nope, suddenly I wake up and I'm the Veruca gnome." "Puzzling that," said Ridcully. "My dad used to say the Veruca gnome turned up if you walked around in bare feet. But I never knew you existed. I thought he just made it up. I mean, two fairies, yes. And them little buggers that live in flowers. Used to collect them myself as a lad, but can't recall anything about Verucas." He drank thoughtfully. Got a distant cousin called Veruca, as a matter of fact. It's quite a nice sound when you come to think of it. He looked at the gnome over at the top of his glass. You didn't become Arch-Chancellor without a feeling for subtle wrongness in a situation. Well, that wasn't quite true. It was more accurate to say that you didn't remain Arch-Chancellor for long. Good job, is it? He said thoughtfully. Dandruff would be better, said the gnome. At least I'd be out in the fresh air. I think we'd better check up on this, said Wrigley. Of course, it might be nothing. Oh, thank you, said the Veruca gnome gloomily. It was a magnificent grotto this year, Vernon Crumley told himself. The staff had worked really hard. The Hogfather's sleigh was a work of art in itself, and the pigs looked nearly real, and a wonderful shade of pink. The grotto took up nearly all of the first floor. One of the pixies had been disciplined for smoking behind the magic tinkling waterfall, and the clockwork dolls of all nations showing how we could all get along were a bit jerky and giving trouble, but all in all, he told himself, it was a display to delight the hearts of kiddies everywhere. The kiddies were queuing up with their parents and watching the display owlishly. And the money was coming in. Oh, how the money was coming in. So that the staff would not be tempted. Mr. Crumley had set up an arrangement of overhead wires across the ceilings of the store. In the middle of each floor was a cashier in a little cage. Staff took money from the customers, put it in a little clockwork cable car, sent it whizzing overhead to the cashier, who would make change and start it rattling back again. Thus, there was no possibility of temptation. And the little trolleys were shooting back and forth like fireworks. Mr. Crumley loved Hogswatch. It was for the kiddies, after all. He tucked his fingers into the pocket of his waistcoat and beamed. Everything going well, Miss Harding? Yes, Mr. Crumley, said the cashier meekly. Jolly good. He looked at the pile of coins. A bright little zigzag crackled off of them and earthed itself onto the metal grill. Mr. Crumley blinked. In front of him, sparks flashed off the steel rims of Miss Harding's spectacles. The grotto display changed. For just a fraction of a second, Mr. Crumley had the sensation of speed, as though what appeared had screeched to a halt, which was ridiculous. The 4 pink papier-mâché pigs exploded. A cardboard snout bounced off Mr. Crumley's head. There, strutting and grunting in the place where the little piggies had been were, well, he assumed they were pigs because hippopotamuses didn't have pointy ears and rings through their noses. But the creatures were huge and gray and bristly, and a cloud of acrid mist hung over each one. And they didn't look sweet. There was nothing charming about them. One turned to look at him with small red eyes, and didn't go oink, which was a sound that Mr. Crumley, born and raised in the city, had always associated with pigs. It went, Nark! The sleigh had changed too. He'd been very pleased with that sleigh. It had delicate silver curly bits on it. He'd personally improved the gluing on of every twinkling star. But the splendor of it was lying in glittering shards around the sledge that looked as though it had been built of crudely sewn tree logs laid on 2 massive wooden runners. It looked ancient, and there were faces carved on the wood. Nasty, crude, grinning faces that looked quite out of place. Parents were yelling and trying to pull their children away, but they weren't having much luck. The children were gravitating towards it like flies to jam. Mr. Crumley ran towards the terrible thing, waving his hand. Stop that! Stop that! He screamed. You'll frighten the kitties! He heard a small boy behind him say, They've got tusks! Cool! His sister said, Hey, look! That one's doing a wee! A tremendous cloud of yellow steam arose. Look, it's going all the way to the stairs! All those who can't swim, hold on to the banisters! They eat you if you're bad, you know, said a small girl with obvious approval. All up, even the bones. They crunch them. Another older child opined. Don't be childish. They're not real. They've just got a wizard in to do magic, or it's all done by clockwork. Everyone knows they're not really real. One of the boars turned to look at him. The boy moved behind his mother. Mr. Crumley, tears of anger streaming down his face, fought through the milling crowd until he reached the Hogfather's grotto. He grabbed a frightened pixie. It's the campaign for Eagle Heights that have done this, isn't it? He shouted. They're out to ruin me. And they're ruining it for all the kiddies. Look at the lovely dolls. The pixie hesitated. Children were clustering around the pigs, despite the continued efforts of their mothers. The small girl was giving one of them an orange. But the animated display of dolls of all nations was definitely in trouble. The music box underneath was still playing Wouldn't It Be Nice If Everyone Was Nice. But the rods that animated the figures had got twisted out of shape, so that the clatching boy was rhythmically hitting the Omnian girl over the head with his ceremonial spear, while the girl in a Gaetian national costume was kicking a small Lamadosian druid repeatedly in the ear. A chorus of small children was cheering them on indiscriminately. There's more trouble in the grotto, Mr. Crumb. A red and white figure pushed its way through the crush and rammed a full spear into Mr. Crumley's hand. That's it, said the old man in the Hogfather costume. I don't mind the smell of oranges and the damp trousers, but I ain't putting up with this. He stamped off through the queue. Mr. Crumley heard him add. And he's not even doing it right. Mr. Crumley forced his way onward. Someone was sitting in the big chair. There was a child on his knee. The figure was strange. It was definitely in something like a Hogfather costume, but Mr. Crumley's eyes kept slipping. It wouldn't focus. It skithered away and tried to put the figure on the very edge of vision. It was like trying to look at your own ear. What's going on here? What's going on here? Crumley demanded. A hand took his shoulder firmly. He turned around and looked into the face of a grotto pixie. At least it was wearing the costume of a grotto pixie, although somewhat askew, as if it had been put on in a hurry. Who are you? The pixie took the shoggy cigarette end out of its mouth and leered at him. Call me Uncle Heavy, he said. You're not a pixie. Nah, I'm a fairy cobbler, mister. Behind Crumley, a voice said, And what do you want for Hogswat, small human? Mr. Crumley turned in horror. In front of, well, he had to think of it as the usurping Hogfather, was a small child of indeterminate sex who seemed to be mostly woolen bobble hat. Mr. Crumley knew how it was supposed to go. It was supposed to go like this. The child was always struck dumb, and the attendant mother would lean forward and catch the Hogfather's eye and say very pointedly, in that voice adults use when they're conspiring against children, You want a baby Tinkler doll, don't you, Doreen? And the Just Like Mummy cookery set you've got in the window. And the cutout kitchen range book. And what do you say? And the sunchild would murmur, Thank you, and get it given a balloon or an orange. This time, though, it didn't work like that. Mother got as far as, You want a Why are your hands on bits of string, child? The child looked down the lengths of its arms to the dangling mittens affixed to its sleeves. It held them up for inspection. Gloves, it said. I see, very practical. Are you real? Said the bobble hat. What do you think? The bobble hat sniggered. I saw your piggy do a wee, it said, and implicit in the tone was the suggestion that this was unlikely to be dethroned as the most enthralling thing the bobble hat had ever seen. Oh, good. It had a great big... What do you want for Hogswatch? Said the Hogfather hurriedly. This is really accurate to children. Mother took her economic cue again and said, See one say? The Hogfather snapped his fingers impatiently. The mother's mouth slammed shut. The child seemed to sense that there was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and spoke quickly. I want an army, and a big castle with pointy bits, said the child, and a sword. What do you say? Prompted the Hogfather. A big sword? Said the child after a pause for deep cognition. That's right. Uncle Heavy nudged the Hogfather. They're supposed to say thank you, he said. Are you sure? People don't normally. I meant they thanked the Hogfather, Albert hissed, which is you, right? Yes, of course. You're supposed to say thank you. Thank you. And be good. This is part of the arrangement. Yes, then we have a contract. The Hogfather reached into his sack and produced a very large model castle with, as correctly interpreted, pointy blue cone roofs on turrets suitable for princesses to be locked in, a box of several hundred assorted knights and warriors, and a sword. It was 4 feet long and glinted along the blade. The mother took a deep breath. You can't give her that! She screamed. It's not safe! It's a sword, said the Hogfather. They're not meant to be safe. She's a child, said Crumley. It's educational. What if she cuts herself? That will be an important lesson. Uncle Heavy whispered urgently. Really? Oh, well, it's not for me to argue, I suppose. The blade went wooden. And she doesn't want all that other stuff, said Doreen's mother in the face of previous testimony. She's a girl. Anyway, I can't afford big paw stuff like that. I thought I gave it away, said the Hogfather, sounding bewildered. You do? Said the mother. You do? Said Crumley, who'd been listening in horror. You don't. That's our merchandise. You can't give it away. Hogswatch isn't about giving it all away. I mean, yes, of course things are given away, he corrected himself, aware that people were watching. But first they have to be bought, do you see? I mean... He laughed nervously, increasing aware of the strangeness around him and the rangy look of Uncle Heavy. Why do I keep wanting to say Uncle Henry? It's not as though the toys are made by little elves at the hub. Damn right, said Uncle Heavy sagely. You'd have to be a maniac even to think of giving an elf a chisel, less than you want their initials carved on your head. Okay, we're going with like Irish or Scottish Fae. Cool. You mean this is all 3, said Doreen's mother sharply, not to be buzzed from what she saw as the central point. Mr. Crumley looked helplessly at the toys. They certainly didn't look like any of his stock. Then he tried hard to look at the Hogfather. Every cell in his brain was telling him that there was a jolly fat man in a red and white suit. Well, nearly every cell. A few of the sparklier ones were saying that his eyes were reporting something else. But they couldn't agree on what. A couple had shut down completely. The words escaped through his teeth. "It seems to be," he said. Although it was Hogwarts, the university buildings were bustling. Wizards didn't go to bed early in any case. And of course, there was the Hogwarts Night Feast to look forward to at midnight. It would give some idea of the scale of the Hogwarts Night Feast that a light snack at UU consisted of a mere 3 or 4 courses, not counting the cheese and nuts. Some of the wizards had been practicing for weeks. The dean in particular could now lift a 20-pound turkey on one fork. Having to wait until midnight put a healthy heads on appetites already professionally honed. There was a general air of pleasant expectancy about the place. A general sizzling of salivary glands. A general careful assembling of the pills and powders against the time. Many hours ahead when 18 courses would gang up somewhere below the ribcage and mount a counterattack. Ridcully stepped out into the snow and turned up his collar. The lights were all on in the high-energy magic building. I don't know, he muttered. Hogwarts nights and they're still working. It's just not natural. When I was a student, I'd have been sick twice by now. In fact, Ponder Stibbins and his group of research students had made a concession to Hogwarts night. They draped holly over Hex and put a paper hat on the big glass dome containing the main ant heap. Every time he came in here, it seemed to Ridcully something more had been done to the engine or thinking machine or whatever it was. Sometimes stuff turned up overnight. Occasionally, according to Stibbins, Hex himself would draw plans for extra bits that it needed. It all gave Ridcully the willies. And an additional willy was engendered right now when he saw the bursar sitting in front of the thing. For a moment, he forgot all about Verucas. "Hooray for the pink, gray, and green," said the bursar. We thought Hex might be of, help, sir," said Ponder Stibbins, who liked to think of himself as the university's token sane person. "With the bursar's problem. We thought it might be a nice Hogwarts present for him." "Ye gods, bursar's got no problem," said Ridcully, and patted the aimlessly smiling man on the head, while mouthing the words, "mad as a spoon." "Mine just wanders a bit, that's all," I said. "Mind wanders a bit, eh?" "Only to be expected, spends far too much time adding up numbers." "Doesn't get out in the fresh air," I said. "You don't get out in the fresh air, old chap." "We thought he might like someone to talk to," said Ponder. What? But I talk to him all the time. I'm always trying to take him out of himself," said Ridcully. "It's important to stop him moping around the place." Yes, certainly," said Ponder diplomatically. He recalled the bursar as a man whose idea of an exciting time had once been a soft-boiled egg. "So, let's give it another try, shall we? Are you ready, Mr. Dinwindle?" "Yes, thank you. A green one with cinnamon if it's not too much trouble." "Can't see how we can talk to a machine," said Ridcully in a solemn voice. "The thing's got no damn ears." In fact, we made it one ear," said Ponder. He pointed to a large drum in a maze of tubes. "Isn't that old Windle Poon's ear trumpet sticking out of the end?" said Ridcully suspiciously. "Yes, Arch-Chancellor," Ponder cleared his throat. "Sound, you see, comes in waves." He stopped. Wizardly premonitions rose in his mind. He just knew Ridcully was going to assume he was talking about the sea. There was going to be one of those huge, bottomless misunderstandings that always occurred whenever anyone tried to explain anything to the Arch-Chancellor. Words like surf and probably ice cream and sand were just... It's all done by magic, Arch-Chancellor, he said, giving up. Ah, right, said wrinkly. He sounded a little disappointed. None of that complicated business with springs and cogwheels and tubes and stuff then? That's right, sir, said Ponder, just magic. Sufficiently advanced magic. Fair enough. What's it do? Hex can hear what you say. Interesting. Saves all that punching holes and bits of cards and hidden keys you lads are forever doing then. What's this, sir? Said Ponder. All right, Adrian. Initiate the GBL. How do you do that then? Said Wrinkly. It means pull the great big lever. Ponder said reluctantly. Ah, takes less time to say. Ponder sighed. Yes, that's right, Arch-Chancellor. He nodded to one of the students who pulled a large red lever marked Do Not Pull. Gears spun somewhere inside Hex. Little trapdoors opened in the ant farms, and millions of ants began to scurry along the networks of glass tubing. Ponder tapped at the huge wooden keyboard. Beats me how you fellows remember how to do all this stuff, said Wrinkly, still watching him with what Ponder considered to be amused interest. Oh, it's largely intuitive, Arch-Chancellor, said Ponder. Obviously, you have to spend a lot of time learning it first, though. Now then, Bursar, he added, if you'd like to say something. He says say something, bussa! Yelled Wrinkly hopefully into the Bursar's ear. Corkscrew, it's a tickler, that's what Nanny says, said the Bursar. Things started to spin inside Hex. At the back of the room, a huge converted water wheel covered with seep skulls began to turn ponderously. And the quill pin in its network of springs and guiding arms started to rate. Why do you think you are a tickler? For a moment, the Bursar hesitated. Then he said, I've got a spoon of my own, you know. Tell me about your spoon. It's a little spoon. Does your spoon worry you? The Bursar frowned, then he seemed to rally. Whoops, here comes Mr. Jelly, he said, but he didn't sound as though his heart was in it. How long have you been Mr. Jelly? The Bursar glared. Are you making fun of me? Amazing, said Wrinkly. It's got him stumped. It's better than dried frog pills. How did you work it out? Said Ponder. It sort of just happened. Amazing, said Wrinkly. He knocked the ashes out of his pipe on Hex's Anthill Inside sticker, causing Ponder to wince. That thing's kind of a big artificial brain, then. You could think of it like that, said Ponder carefully. Of course, Hex doesn't actually think, not as such. It just appears to be thinking. Ah, like the Dean, said Wrinkly. Any chance of fitting a brain like this into the Dean's head? It does weigh 10 tons, Arch-Chancellor. Ah, really? Oh. Quite a large crowbar would be in order, then. He paused and then reached into his pocket. I knew I'd come here for something, he added. This here chappie is the Veruca gnome. Hello, said the Veruca gnome slyly, who seems to have popped into existence to be with us here tonight. And you know, I always thought, this is a bit odd. Of course, there's always something a bit unreal about Hogswatch Night, said Wrinkly. Last night of the year and so on, the Hogfather whizzing around and so forth. Time of the darkest shadows and so on. All the old years occult rubbish piling up. Anything could happen. I just thought you fellows might check up on this. Probably nothing to worry about. A Veruca gnome, said Pounder. The gnome clutched his sack protectively. Makes about as much sense as a lot of things, I suppose, said Wrinkly. After all, there's a tooth fairy, ain't there? You might as well wonder why we have a god of wine and not a god of hangovers. He stopped. Anyone else hear that noise just then, he said. Sorry, Arch-Chancellor. Sort of glingle, 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 like little tinkly bells. Didn't hear anything like that, sir. Oh, Brinkley shrugged. Anyway, what I was saying, yes. No one's ever heard of a Veruca gnome until tonight. That's right, said the gnome. Even I've never heard of me until tonight, and I'm me. We'll see what we can find out, Arch-Chancellor, said Ponder diplomatically. Good man. Amazing, he said again. He just looks as though he's thinking, right? Yes. But he's not actually thinking. No. So he just gives the impression of thinking, but it's really just a show? Yes. Just like everyone else then, really? Said Wrinkly. I think after this I'm going to need to go stare at a wall for a while. Okay, we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to walk away for a second, grab some water. Be right back. God, I need to get editing software. And a computer I can use it on. The boy gave the Hogfather an appraising stare and sat down on the official knee. Let's be absolutely clear. I know you're just someone dressed up, he said. The Hogfather is a biological and temporal impossibility. I hope we understand one another. Ah, so I don't exist. Correct. This is just a bit of seasonal frippery. And I may say rampantly commercial. My mother's already bought my presents, of course. I instructed her as to the right ones, of course. She often gets things wrong. I hate this kid so fucking much. The Hogfather glanced briefly at the smiling, worried image of maternal ineffectiveness hovering nearby. How old are you, boy? The child rolled his eyes. You're not supposed to say that, he said. I have done this before, you know. You have to start by asking me my name. Aaron Fidget, The Fines, Edgray Road, Ankh-Morpork. I expect someone told you, said Aaron. I expect those people dressed up as pixies get the information from the mothers. And you are 8 going on, about 45, said the Hogfather. There's forms to fill in when they pay, I expect. And you want walnuts, inoffensive reptiles of the Stowe Plains, a display cabinet, a collector's album, a killing jar, and a lizard press. What is a lizard press? You can't glue them in when they're still fat, or didn't you know that? I expect he told you about them when I was momentarily distracted by the display of pencils. Look, so we end this charade. Just give me my orange and we'll say no more about it. I can give far more than oranges. Yes, I saw that. Probably done in collusion with accomplices to attract gullible customers. Oh dear, you've even got a false beard. By the way, old chap, did you know that you're pigs? Yes. All done by mirrors and string and pipes, I expect. It all looked very artificial to me. The Hogfather snapped his fingers. That's probably a signal I expect, said the boy, getting down. Thank you very much. Happy Hogswatch, said the Hogfather as the boy walked away. Well, Uncle Heavy patted him on the shoulder. Well done, master, he said, very patient. I'd have given him a clock affront the old ear hole on myself. Oh, I'm sure he'll see the error of his ways. The Red Hood turned so that only Albert could see into its depths. Right around the time he opens those boxes his mother was carrying. Ho, ho, ho. Don't tie it so tight, don't tie it so tight. Squeak. There's a bickering behind Susan as he shot along the shelves in the canyons of Death's huge library, which was so big that clouds would form in it if they dared. Right, said the voice he was trying to ignore. That's about right. I've got to be able to move my wings, right? Squeak. Ah, said Susan under her breath. The Hogfather. He had several shelves, not just one book. The first volume seemed to be written on a roll of animal skin. The Hogfather was old. Okay, how does it look? Squeak. Miss, said the raven, seeking a second opinion. Susan looked up. The raven bounced past, its breast bright red. Twit, twit, it said, bobbly bob, bob, hop, hopping along. You're fooling no one but yourself, said Susan. I can see the string. Sion rolled the scroll. Maybe I should sit on a snowy log, mumbled the raven behind her. That's probably the trick, right enough. I can't read this, said Susan. The letters are all odd. Ethereal rune, said the raven. The Hogfather ain't human after all. Susan ran her hands over the thin leather. The shapes float around her fingers. She couldn't read them, but she could feel them. There was the sharp smell of snow, so vivid that her breath condensed in the air. There were sounds, hooves, the snap of branches in a freezing forest. A bright, shining ball. Susan jerked her wake and thrust the scroll aside. Sion rolled the next one, which looked as though it was made of strips of bark. Characters hovered over the surface, whatever they were. They had never been designed to be read by the eye. You could believe they were a braille for the touching mind. Images ribboned across her senses. Wet fur, sweat, pine, soot, iced air, the tang of damp ass, pig, manure. Her governess mind hastily corrected. There was blood and the taste of beans? It was all images without words, almost animal. But none of this is right. Everyone knows he's a jolly old man who hands out presents to kids, he said aloud. Is, not was. You know how it is. Do I? Said the raven. Do I? It's like, industrial retraining, said the raven. Even gods have to move with the times. Am I right? He was probably quite different thousands of years ago, stands to reason. No one wore stockings, for one thing. He scratched at his beak. Yes, he continued expansively. He was probably just your basic winter demiurge. Blood on the snow, making the sun come up, starts off with animal sacrifice, Hunt some big, hairy animal to death, that kind of stuff. There's some people up on the ram tops who kill a wren at Hogswatch and walk around from house to house singing about it with a whack folo diddle dillo. Very folkloric, very mythic. A wren? Why? I don't know. Maybe someone said, hey, how'd you like to hunt this evil bastard of an eagle with his big sharp beak and great ripping talons sort of thing? Or how about instead you hunt this wren, which is basically about the size of a pea and goes twit? Go on, you choose. Anyways, then later on it sinks to the level of religion. And then they start this business where some poor bugger finds a special bean in his tucker. Oh ho, everyone says you're king, mate, and he thinks, this is a bit alright. Only they don't say it because it wouldn't be a good thing to start any long books. Because next thing, he's legging it over the snow with half a dozen other buggers, tasting with holly sickles so the earth will come to life again and all the snow will go away. Very, ethnic. Then some bright spark thought, hey, looks like that damn sun comes up anyway, so how come we're giving these druids all this free grub? Next thing you know, there's a job vacancy. That's the thing about gods. They always find a way to, hang on. The damn sun comes up anyway, Susan repeated. How do you know that? Oh, observation. It happens every morning. I seen it. I meant all that stuff about holly sickles and things. The raven contrived to look smug. Very occult bird, your basic raven, he said. Blind Io, the thunder god, used to have these mythic ravens that flew everywhere and told him everything that was going on. Used to? Well, you know how he's not got eyes in his face, just those, free floating eyeballs that go and zoom around. The raven coughed in species embarrassment. Bit of an accident waiting to happen, really. Do you ever think of anything except eyeballs? Well, there's entrails. Squeak. He's right, though, said Susan. Gods don't die. Never completely die. There's always somewhere, she told herself. Inside some stone, perhaps, or the words of a song, or riding the mind of some animal, or maybe in a whisper on the wind. They never entirely go. They hang on to the world by the tip of a fingernail. Always fighting to find a way back. Once a god, always a god. Dead perhaps, but only like the world in winter. All right, she said. Let's see what happened to him. She reached out for the last book and tried to open it at random. The feeling lasted her out of the book like a whip. Hoofs, fear, blood, snow, cold, night. She dropped the scroll. It slammed shut. Squeak? I'm all right. She looked down at the book and knew that she'd been given a friendly warning. Such as a pet animal might give when it was crazed with pain, but still tame enough not to claw and bite the hand that fed it. This time. Wherever the Hogfather was, dead, alive, somewhere, he wanted to be left alone. Squeak-eek. She eyed the death of rats. His little eye sockets flared blue in a disconcertingly familiar way. The rat says if he wanted to find out about the Hogfather, he'd go to the Castle of Bones. Oh, that's just a nursery tale, said Susan. That's where the letters are supposed to go that are posted up the chimney. That's just an old story. Gonna let that sink in for a minute and remember what's come before. She turned. The rat and the raven were staring at her. And she realized that she'd been too normal. Squeak! The rat says, what do you mean, just? Said the raven. Chicken Wire sidled towards Medium Dave in the garden, if you could call it a garden. It was the land around the house, if you could call it a house. No one said much about it, but every so often he just had to get out. It didn't feel right inside. He shivered. Where's himself, he said. Oh, up at the top, said Medium Dave, still trying to open that room. The one with all the locks? Yeah. Medium Dave was rolling a cigarette. Inside the house, or tower, or both, or whatever. You couldn't smoke, not properly. When you smoked inside, it tasted horrible and you felt sick. What for? We done what we came to do, didn't we? Stood there like a bunch of kids and watched that wet wizard do all his chanting. It was all I could do to keep a straight face. What's he after now? He just said it was locked that bad he wanted to see inside. I thought we were supposed to do what we came for and go. Yeah, you tell him. Want to roll up? Chickenwire took the bag of tobacco and relaxed. I've seen some bad places in my time, but this takes the serious biscuit. Yeah. It's the cute that wears you down. And there's got to be something else to eat than apples. Yeah. And the damn sky is really getting on my nerves. Yeah. I can't do British accents, I'm sorry. I'm not even going to try. They kept their eyes averted from that damn sky. For some reason, it made you feel that it was about to fall on you. And it was worse if you let your eyes stray to the gap where a gap shouldn't be. The effect was like getting toothache in your eyeballs. In the distance, Banjo was swinging on a swing. Odd that, Dave thought. Banjo seemed perfectly happy here. He found a tree that grows lollipops yesterday, he said moodily. Well, I say yesterday, but how can you tell? And he follows the man around like a dog. No one ever laid a punch on Banjo since our man died. He's just like a little boy, you know, inside. Always has been. Looks to me for everything, used to be. If I told him punch someone, he'd do it. And they stayed punched. Yeah. Now he follows him around everywhere. Makes me sick. What are you doing here then? $10,000 and he says there's more. More than we can imagine. He was always Tateme. He ain't just after money. Yeah, well, I didn't sign up for world domination, said Medium Dave. That sort of thing gets you into trouble. Yeah, just stick to the tri-state area. I remember your ma'am saying that sort of thing, Chicken Wire. Medium Dave rolled his eyes. Everyone remembered Ma Lillywhite. Very straight lady was your ma, tough but fair. Yeah, tough. I recall that one time she strangled Classy Ron with his own leg, Chicken Wire went on. She had a wicked right arm on her. Your ma'am? Yeah, wicked. She wouldn't have stood for someone like Tia Teme. Yeah, said Medium Dave. That was a lovely funeral you boys gave her. Most of the shades turned up, very respectful. All them flowers, and everyone looked so... Chicken Wire floundered. Happy. In a sad way, of course. Yeah. Have you got any idea how to get back home? Medium Dave shook his head. Me neither. Find the place again, I suppose. Chicken Wire shivered. I mean, what he did to that Carter, well, I wouldn't even act like that to me own dad. Yeah. Ordinary mental, yes, I can deal with that. But he can be talking quite normal and then, yeah. Maybe the both of us could creep up on him and, yeah. And how long will we live? In seconds. We could get lucky, Chicken Wire began. Yeah, you've seen him. This isn't one of those blokes who threatens you. This is one of those blokes who kill you as soon as look at you. Easier too. We gotta hang on, right? It's like that saying about riding a tiger. What saying about riding a tiger? Said Chicken Wire suspiciously. Well, Medium Dave hesitated. You get branches slapping you in the face, fleas, that sort of thing. So you gots to hang on. Think of the money. There's bags of it in there. You saw it. I keep thinking of that glass eye watching me. I keep thinking it can see right in my head. Don't worry, he doesn't suspect you have anything. How do you know? You're still alive, yeah? In the grotto of the Hogfather, a round-eyed child. Happy Hogswatch, ho, ho, ho. And your name is Euphrasia Goat, correct? Go on, dear. Answer the nice man. Yes. And you are 6 years old. Go on, dear. They're all the same at this age, aren't they? Yes. And you want a pony. Yes. A small hand pulled the Hogfather's hood down to mouth level. Heavy Uncle Albert heard a ferocious whispering. Then the Hogfather leaned back. Yes, I know. What a naughty pig it was indeed. His sape flickered for a moment, and then a hand went into the sack. Here's a bridle for your pony, and a saddle, and a rather strange hard hat, and a pair of those trousers that make you look as though you have a large rabbit in each pocket. But we can't have a pony, can we, Yuffie? Because we live on the 3rd floor? Oh yes, it's in the kitchen. I'm sure you're making a little joke, Hogfather. Ho ho ho, yes. What a jolly fat man I am. In the kitchen, what a joke. Dollies and so on will be delivered later, as per your letter. What do you say, Yuffie? Thank you. You didn't really put a pony in their kitchen, did you? Said a heavy Uncle Albert as the line went on. Don't be foolish, Albert. I said that to be jolly. Oh, right. For a moment, it's in the bedroom. Ah, more hygienic. Well, make sure of one thing, said Albert. 3rd floor? They're gonna believe, all right. Yes, I think I'm getting the hang of this. Ho, ho, ho. At the hub of the Discworld, the snow burned blue and green. The aurora borealis hung in the sky. Curtains of pale, cold fire that circled the central mountains and cast their spectral light over the ice. They bellowed, swirled, and then trailed a ragged arm on the end of which was a tiny dot. That became, when the eye of imagination drew nearer, Binky. He trotted to a halt and stood on the air. Susan looked down. And then found what she was looking for. At the end of a valley of snow-mounded trees, something gleamed brightly, reflecting the sky. The Castle of Bones. Her parents had sat her down one day when she was about 6 or 7 and explained how such things as the Hogfather did not really exist. How they were pleasant little stories that it was fun to know. How they were not real. And she had believed it. All the fairies and boogeymen, all those stories from the blood and bone of humanity were not really real. They lied. A 7-foot skeleton had turned out to be her grandfather. Not a flesh and bone grandfather, obviously, but a grandfather you could say in the bone. Binky touched down and trotted over the snow. Was the Hogfather a god? Why not, thought Susan. There were sacrifices after all that sherry and pork pie, and he made commandments and rewarded the good. And he knew what you were doing. If you believed, nice things happened to you. Sometimes you found him in a grotto, and sometimes he was up there in the sky. The Castle of Bones loomed over her now. It certainly deserved the capital letters up this close. She'd seen a picture of it in one of the children's books. Despite its name, the woodcut artist had endeavored to make it look sort of jolly. It wasn't jolly. The pillars at the entrance were hundreds of feet high. Each of the steps leading up was taller than a man. They were the gray-green of old ice. Ice, not bone. There were faintly familiar shapes to the pillars, possibly a suggestion of femur or skull, but it was made of ice. Binky was not challenged by the high stairs. It wasn't that he flew. It was simply that he walked on a ground level of his own devising. Snow had blown over the ice. Susan looked down at the drifts. Death left no tracks. But there were the faint outlines of booted footprints. So be prepared to bet they belonged to Albert. And yes, half obscured by the snow, it looked as though a sledge had stood here. Animals had milled around, but the snow was covering everything. She dismounted. This was certainly the place described, but it still wasn't right. It was supposed to be a blaze of light and a buzz with activity, but it looked like a giant mausoleum. A little way beyond the pillars was a very large slab of ice, cracked into pieces. Far above, stars were visible through the hole it had left in the roof. Even as he stared up, a few small lumps of ice thumped into a snowdrift. The raven popped into existence and fluttered wearily onto a stump of ice beside her. "This place is a morgue," said Susan. "It's going to be mine if I do any more flying tonight," panted the raven as the death of rats got off its back. "I never signed up for all this long distance, faster in time stuff. I should be back in a forest somewhere making excitingly decorated constructions to attract females." "That's Brower Bird," said Susan. "Ravens don't do that." "Oh, so it's typecasted now, is it?" said the raven. What was that voice? "I'm missing meals here, you do know that." It shriveled its independently sprung eyes. "So where's all the lights?" it said. "Where's all the noise? Where's all the jolly little buggers in pointy hats and red and green suits hitting wooden toys unconvincingly, yet rhythmically, with hammers?" "This is more like the temple of some old thunder god," said Susan. "Squeak?" "No, I read the map right. Anyways, Albert's been here, this fag ass all over the place." Fags and cigarettes, don't. The rat jumped down and walked around for a moment, bony snout near the ground. After a few moments of snuffling, gave a squeak and hurried off into the gloom. Susan followed. As her eyes grew more accustomed to the faint blue-green light, she made out something rising out of the floor. It was a pyramid of steps with a big chair on top. Behind her, a pillar groaned and twisted slightly. "Squeak?" "The rat says this place reminds him of some old mine," said the raven. "You know, after it's been deserted and no one's been paying attention to the roof supports and so on. We see a lot of them." At least these steps were human-sized, Susan thought, ignoring the chatter. Snow had come in through another gap in the roof. Albert's footprints had stamped around quite a lot here. "Maybe the old Hogfather crashed his sleigh," the raven suggested. "Squeak?" "Well, it could have happened. Pigs are not notably aerodynamic, are they? And with all this snow, you know, poor visibility, big cloud ahead, turns out too late to be a mountain. There's buggers in saffron robes looking down at you, poor devil. Tries to remember whether you're supposed to shove someone's head between your legs, then wham! And it's all over, bar some lucky mountaineers making an awful lot of sausages and finding the flight recorder. Squeak! Yes, but he's an old man. Probably shouldn't be in the sky at this time of life. Susan pulled at something half buried in the snow. It was a red and white striped candy cane. She kicked the snow aside elsewhere and found a wooden toy soldier and the kind of uniform that would only be inconspicuous if you wore it in a nightclub for chameleons on hard drugs. Some further probing found a broken trumpet. There was some more groaning in the darkness. The raven cleared its throat. What the rat meant about this place being like a mine, he said, was that abandoned mines tend to creak and groan in the same way, see? No one looking after the pit props. Things fall in. Next thing you know, you're a squiggle in the sandstone. We shouldn't hang around, is what I'm saying. Susan walked further in, lost in thought. This was all wrong. This place looked as though it had been deserted for years, which couldn't be true. The column nearest her creaked and twisted slightly. A fine haze of ice crystals dropped from the roof. Of course, this wasn't exactly a normal place. You couldn't build an ice palace this big. It was a bit like Death's house, if he abandoned it for too long, and all those things that had been suspended, like time and physics, would roll over it. It would be like a dam bursting. She turned to leave and heard the groan again. It wasn't dissimilar to the tortured sounds being made by the ice, except that ice afterwards didn't moan, "Oh, me." There was a figure lying in a snowdrift. She'd almost missed it because it was wearing a long white robe. It was spread-eagled, as though it had planned to make snow angels and had then decided against it. And it wore a little crown, apparently of vine leaves. And it kept groaning. She looked up. The roof was open here, too. But no one could have fallen that far and survived. No one human, anyway. He looked human and, in theory, quite young. But it was only in theory, because even by the secondhand light of the glowing snow, his face looked like someone had been sick with it. The recumbent figure opened its eyes and stared straight up. "I wish I was dead," it moaned. A piece of ice, the size of a house, fell down in the far depths of the building and exploded in a shower of sharp little shards. "You may have come to the right place," said Susan. She grabbed the boy under his arms and hauled him out of the snow. "I think leaving would be a very good idea around now, don't you? This place is going to fall apart. Oh, me." She managed to get one of his arms around her neck. "Can you walk?" "Oh, me." "It might help if you stopped saying that and tried walking." "I'm sorry, but I seem to have too many legs. Ow." Susan did her best to prop him up, as swaying and slipping, they made their way back to the exit. "My head," said the boy. "My head, my head, my head. It feels awful, my head. Feels like someone's hitting it. My head with a hammer." Someone was. There was a small green and purple imp, amid the damp curls and holding a very large mallet. It gave Susan a friendly nod and brought the hammer down again. "Oh, me." "That wasn't necessary," said Susan. "You telling me my job," said the imp. "I suppose you could do better, huh?" "I wouldn't do it at all." "Well, someone's got to do it," said the imp. "He's part of the arrangement," said the boy. "Yeah, see?" said the imp. Can you hold the hammer while I go and coat his tongue with yellow gunk? Get down right now. Susan made a grab for the creature. It leapt away, still clutching the hammer, and grabbed a pillar. I'm part of the arrangement, I am, it yelled. The boy clutched his head. I feel awful, he said. Have you got on any ice? Whereupon, because there are convincing stronger than mere physics, the building fell in. The collapse of the Castle of Bones was stately and impressive and seemed to go on for a long time. Pillars fell in, the slabs of the roof slid down. The ice crackled and splintered. The air above the tumbling wreckage filled with a haze of snow and ice crystals. Susan watched from the trees. The boy, who he leaned against a handy trunk, opened his eyes. That was amazing, he managed. Why, you mean the way it's all turning back into snow? The way you just picked me up and ran. Ouch. Oh, that. The grinding of the ice continued. The fallen pillars didn't stop moving when they collapsed, but went on tearing themselves apart. When the fog of ice settled, there was nothing but drifted snow. As though it was never there, Susan said aloud. She turned to the growing figure. All right, what were you doing there? I don't know. I was just opened my eyes and there I was. Who are you? I think my name is Bilius. I'm the oh god of hangovers. There's a god of hangovers? And oh god, he corrected. When people witness me, you see, they clutch their head and say, oh god. How many of you are standing here? What? There's just me. Ah, fine. I've never heard of a god of hangovers. You've heard of Bibulus, the god of wine? Ouch. Oh, yes? Big fat man, wears vine leaves around his head, always pictured with a glass in his hand. Ow. Well, you know why he's so cheerful? Him and his big face. It's because he knows he's going to feel good in the morning. It's because it's me that gets the hangover, said Susan. I don't even drink. Ow. But who is it who ends up head down in the privy every morning? Arr. He stopped and clutched at his head. So do your skull feel like it's lined with dog hair? I don't think so. Ah, Billy swayed. You know when people say I had 15 loggers last night and when I woke up my head was clear as a bell? Oh yes. Bastards! That's because I was the one who woke up groaning in a pile of recycled chili. Just once. I mean, just once. I'd like to open my eyes in the morning without my head sticking in something. He paused. Are there any giraffes in this wood? Up here, I shouldn't think so. He looked nervously past Susan's head. Not even indigo-colored ones, which are sort of stretched and keep flashing on and off? Very unlikely. Thank goodness for that. He swayed back and forth. Excuse me, I think I'm about to throw up my breakfast. It's the middle of the evening. Is it? In that case, I think I'm about to throw up my dinner. He folded up gently in the snow behind the tree. He's a long strake of whittle, isn't he? Said a voice from a branch. It was the raven. Got a neck with a knee in it. The oh god reappeared after a noisy interlude. I know I must eat, he mumbled. It's just that the only time I remember seeing my food, it's always going the other way. What were you doing in there? Said Susan. Ouch. Search me, said the oh god. It's only a mercy I wasn't holding a traffic sign and wearing a... He winced and paused. Having some kind of women's underwear about my person, he sighed. Someone somewhere had a lot of fun, he said wistfully. I wish it was me. Get a drink inside you, that's my advice, said the raven. Have a hair of the dog that bit someone else. But why there? Susan insisted. The god stopped trying to glare at the raven. I don't know, where was there exactly? Susan looked back at where the castle had been. It was entirely gone. There was a very important building there a moment ago, she said. The god nodded carefully. I often see things that weren't there a moment ago, he said. And they often aren't there a moment later, which is a blessing in most cases. Let me tell you. So I don't usually take a lot of notice. He folded up and landed in the snow again. There's just snow now, Susan thought. Nothing but snow and the wind. There's not even a ruin. The certainty stole over again that the Hogfather's castle wasn't simply not there anymore. No, it had never been there. There was no ruin, no trace. It had been an odd enough place. It was where the Hogfather lived, according to legends. Which was odd when you thought about it. It didn't look like the kind of place a cheery old toy maker would live in. The wind sowed in the trees behind them. Snow slid off branches. Somewhere in the dark, there was a flurry of hooves. A spidery little figure lifted off a snowdrift and landed on the god's head. It turned a beady eye up towards Susan. All right by you, is it? Said the imp, producing its huge hammer. Some of us have a job to do, you know, even if we are of a metaphorical, nay, folkloric persuasion. Oh, go away. If you think I'm bad, wait until you see the little pink elephants, said the imp. I don't believe you. They come out of his ears and fly around his head, making tweeting noises. Ah, said the raven sagely. That sounds more like robins. I wouldn't put anything past them. The god grunted. Susan suddenly felt that she didn't want to leave him. He was human. Well, human-shaped. Well, at least he had 2 arms and legs. He'd freeze to death here. Of course, gods, or even gods, probably couldn't. But humans didn't think like that. You couldn't just leave someone. She prided herself on this bit of normal thinking. Besides, he might have some answers if she could make him stay awake long enough to understand the questions. From the edge of the frozen forest, animal eyes watched them go. And I think we're going to leave it there for today. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you next time. Merry Christmas to all. It's all a good time. Take care.